this is Archana Singh from GB Pant Social Science Institute, Allahabad. I am going to present module number 25, paper number 15. My topic is caste and gender. I am trying to explain how we can understand the hegemony by caste and gender. First, I will try to explain what are the structural elements of the Indian society. Caste is a type of social stratification hereditary in nature. In this system, status of a person is ascribed, it is not achieved, it is fixed by birth, it is based on the status of family into which one is born. In this hierarchy of caste system, it is rigid and strictly maintained through socio-cultural and religious rules. It restricts the mobility of person between different caste group by practicing endogamy, that is intercaste marriage. Therefore, it is a closed structure. For rigorous maintaining endogamy, women should be controlled under stern control. Women are the only tools through which we can maintain the purity of blood. By understanding caste and gender dynamics, a true comprehension of key social relations and social inequalities faced by women in India emerges. This analytical lens highlights how these women become instruments through which social system replicate itself and systematic inequality is maintained, where few were denied for opportunities, choices and freedom at multiple levels, undermining not only the dignity and self-respect of someone but also their right to development. We need to understand this dynamic of caste as patriarchy is almost same in all castes, sometime in explicit form, sometime in implicit. Prior to understand the horizontal oppression of gender within the caste, we must understand the vertical suppression of caste in our society. In order to understand the effect of caste on women, their lives, we have to know about how caste shapes life of these women. We must investigate why concept of caste make women subordinate everywhere in the Indian society. Caste work as a tool to construct a closed structure to preserve land and women. Purity of caste is the tool through which it maintains and closely guarding women, the caste purity is maintained throughout our social structure. Such notions are repeatedly maintained by Dharmashastra and Manusmriti. Hegemony of gender is closely connected to caste hegemony. So, to understand gender hierarchy, we should know the caste in our Indian society. If we talk about the origin of the word caste was invented by Portuguese seafarers. It was taken from a Portuguese word that is casta, means a species or breeds of animals or plants, tribes, clans or lineage among men. According to Purush Sukta of Rig Veda, the primal man, Purush, destroyed himself to create a human society, and different parts of his body created the four Varnas, the Brahmins from his head, the Kshatriyas from his hands, the Vaishyas from his thighs and Shudras from his feet. According to another theory, the Chaturvarna system began with the arrival of Aryans in India. The Varna hierarchy is determined by descending order of different organs from which Varnas were created. Brahmins were originated from the head of Purusha and they considered the intelligent and most powerful because of their wisdom. Kshatriyas, considered the warrior caste, were created by arms, which represent strength. Next are the Vaishyas or merchant, originated from Thai. A Vaishya's community was to ensure the community's prospect through agriculture, cattle rearing and trade. Shudras on the last rung of this hierarchy was supposed to be derived from the feet, who were usually laborers, peasants, artisans and servants. Shudras do not have any special skill, and so they have to serve as slaves to the upper three castes. Shudras were kept deprived of all rights or privileges. They were restricted to learn Vedas. They were, and at the very bottom, known as the fifth Varna, they were untouchables or Chandalas. According to this theory of Chaturvarna, the caste system began. According to another theory of Chaturvarna, the caste system began with the arrival of Aryans in India. The Aryans arrived in India around 1500 BC. The fair-skinned Aryans arrived in India from southeast and North Asia. They began conquering and taking control over the regions of North India and subjugated the original inhabitants of India. The Aryan organized among themselves in three castes. The first group was priests, they were called Brahmins. The second group of warriors are called Kshatriyas, and the third group of the farmers and merchants was called Vaishyas. The Aryan who conquered and took control over the part of North India forced the original inhabitants to serve them as Das or Shudras. In order to maintain their hegemony over the original inhabitants, Aryans created social and religious rule to maintain their supremacy. Initially, these varnas were based on occupation. It helped in division of labor for smooth functioning of society, and it is supposed that time one can move from one varna to another varna. But in later Vedic period, this system became rigid and became birth based, that is jati. The Manusmriti played an important role in maintaining a rigid hierarchical socio-political order of society. They created a structure which justified caste and gender primacy. It laid the rules for domination over lower caste and females. Manusmriti, one of the most notable ancient texts, it not only divided people into stratified caste system, but promotes inequality between men and women. According to Manusmriti, women have no right to education, independence or wealth. Women, when she was a young or even an aged one, nothing can be done by them independently, even in their own houses. Her father protects her in childhood, her husband protects her in youth, and her son protects in old age. Women is never fit for independence. Women have no knowledge of religion because they have no right to read the Vedas. Uttering of Vedic mantra which is necessary for removing sin is prohibited for women. As women cannot utter Vedas, they are unclean as the untruth. Not only this, it justifies the treatment of Dalit women as a sex object. A Brahmin, a Kshatriya or Vaishya man can sexually exploit any Shudra women. Even killing of a Dalit woman is explicitly justified as a minor offense for the Brahmins, equal to killing an animal. Now I will describe what was the position of caste and gender in colonial rule. Advent of Britishers introduced modernity and education in India. Some progressive British officials resisted caste and gender domination and cruel practices based on caste and gender hierarchy, but they were well aware of the fact that to rule Indians, they should not touch its essential structure of caste and gender. So, caste and gender hierarchy was in fact beneficial for them, as half of the population was oppressed and they couldn't raise their voices. They were quite dominated. According to Risley, the caste system arose out of a racial class. He postulated that racial distinct, fair, long-headed race of invading Aryas speaking an Indo-European language entered the subcontinent from the northwest and encountered and subjugated the dark-skinned Dravidians, the oldest of Indian races. These invading Aryans subdued the inferior race, captured women according to their needs, and closed the movement of further intermixture of blood. They become the upper caste, and Risley tried to show that caste and women were the main tools to maintain that hierarchy. Caste always remained as most dominant factor of our society, especially that North Indian society and Hindi speaking belt. In Hindi speaking society, even especially in Hindu caste society, caste division plays a part of actual social interaction. In the ideal scheme of value, members of different castes are expected to behave as depicted in their religious texts and to have different values as per their caste, but the gender structure was almost same in all castes. Ancient texts and epics, be they Manusmriti, Mahabharata or Ramayana, often depicted the Dalit women as vulgar, treacherous, dangerous, polluted and evil others. The Manusmriti dehumanizes the Dalit women as fierce, untouchable women, as one permanently and constantly polluted. On the other hand, the contrary discourse emerged to represent these Dalit women as a commodity in the normative images prescribed of behavior described as contrary to the upper caste women. The unvoiced, unseen Dalit women were contrary to the upper caste depictions. They were not referred here as a women, but as a devil, as shown by their caste identity, that Chamarin, Bhangin, Kaharin, all these. She was not just a footnote, but a constitutive note perceived in binary to upper caste women, containing all the contradictory qualities of the Bhadra Mahila. To maintain the hegemony and advantageous beliefs were propagated by the upper caste in self-interest, and powerless were forced to gradually accept those beliefs and rules as truth. Foucault especially proposed that knowledge is not an abstract entity. Each society strategically generates its own knowledge as a regime of truths. Leela Dubey writes that caste systems are based upon a fundamental difference between male and female body in terms of their vulnerability in a physical and sexual act. Sexual involvement is much more serious matter for an upper caste woman, since the physical act causes an internal pollution. The stigmatized social position of Dalit women as a deviant one make her more vulnerable. As Foucault writes that all representations are by their very nature insidious instrument for oppression and control, both tools and effects of power. They are construction of Dalit women, and even in the literature it seems to hold that Dalit women were constructed to support that dominant ideology of caste. To make this issue more clarified, we can mention the Channa's quote, I quote, "Thus the ideal women of Indian women was wife of Indian men, the Brahmin Pandit, the Kshatriya ruler, or at best the Vaishya, the householder. Left out were the women who are laborers, washerwomen, tribal women, those who are not strongholds or the upper holds of Hindu caste household. They can be exploited, and this make them more vulnerable. An important step of Dalit awakening that gave a momentum to Dalit movement was the coming of B.R. Ambedkar. This phase began between 1920s and 30s. He fought for the rights of Dalit in British India and even after independence. Ambedkar held that subordination of Dalit was primarily economic and political, and it could be only changed by changing social structure through political and educational means. Ambedkar emphasized on education, and he insisted that both Dalit and men and women should be educated to come out of this domination. In fact, this was a radical and very important departure in the situation and life of Dalit and especially their women in India. The intervention of Dr. Ambedkar and his modernist insight aroused a sense of self-esteem among his community members and their women, and inculcated in their mind a consciousness of their rights. The position of women progressed through education inspired these women to transform themselves into a dissenting subjects. I would like to share the Ambedkar speech on the evening of Mahat Satyagraha, where he inspired Dalit women to come out of this dominating or exploiting structure. Ambedkar said, the problem of living have to be tackled by men and women together. If men alone undertake this task, and that is annihilation of caste, I have no doubt take a longer time. But if women, however, take this up, I believe that task can be successfully and completed sooner. Therefore, you must attend the Parishad. The task of ending untouchability is a women question. You have gave birth to us, and you should know how people grade us and treat us even lower than animals. When we will come to you and arouse the questions ki why would you give us birth and how we are lower than other people who are from the Vaishyas or Brahmin women. What is the difference between children of caste or Savarna or among us? You must think and realize that you have as much as strength and purity as Brahmin women have. In fact, the courage and will you have is much more than those women. Then you should either stop giving us birth or should organize yourself to stop this exploitative order. So, take a promise that you will not live with this stigma. It is mark or this stigma of untouchability is making us day by day vulnerable. These customs were forced upon us from the point of history. The way you drape yourself as in saris marks you as untouchables. Your jewelries, the neckful and handful of artificial jewelries mark you as a Dalit. Knowledge is the only tool that can emancipate you. They are essential for women too. I hope that you will take this task seriously and implement it without any delay. In post-Ambedkarite era, during 1970s, the Dalit Panther movement emerged, and among the younger generation of Dalit, it started from Maharashtra. This was the expression of their anger and frustration from the humiliation and violence against Dalit by upper caste Hindus in many parts of India. A lot of dissenting Dalit literature came up during this movement. With these writings, Dalit communities started to express their experience of violence and humiliation in the past as well as in the present. The recent trend of untouchable writers and thinkers and means to get published their stories brought a unique opportunity to represent their experiences and mobilize their community under the single thread of pain and humiliation, and this helped them to share the experience of oppression and initiate a struggle against domination, to create new social identities and ideological basis for action. Such opportunities contributed to some extent to create a counter literature and cultural consciousness among the lower caste of North India. But this Dalit literature too overlooked the specific dilemma of Dalit women. Literature by Dalit women was seriously ignored by Dalit writers. Dalit patriarchy further nurtured the vicious circle of subjugation, so there was no place of emancipation of Dalit women here too. Dalit literature constructed Dalit women in the similar patriarchal framework which led to overall subjugation of these Dalit women. In upper caste, women were dominated in order to serve the superiority of their male and clan, to maintain the purity of blood that was called by Uma Chakravarti Brahmanical patriarchy. But the subordinate position of women served to sustain the cultural superiority. But the Dalit male intellectuals like Kancha Ilaiah have valorized that Dalit patriarchy is essentially democratic. But this was not true. Scholars like Gopal Guru said that no patriarchy can be democratic, and the scholars have to locate the different voices of Dalit women. Dalit women speaks differently, and we have to address their voices differently. So, the appearances of these women in Dalit public sphere was qualitative only. It is caught in the R women framework, where the dominant voices overpower the weak voices and present a unified we voice. Dalit males were quite influenced by the pattern maker, upper caste men, said the Brahmanical patriarchy. The phenomenon of imitating upper class men weakened the Dalit movement, and the domination of caste and gender was quite sanctioned by Hindu religion, mostly in the upper caste, and it practiced more rigorously to maintain their blood, cultural superiority and supremacy in all over structure of social region. Poor, low caste and Dalit women negatively represented in all the text. Though scholars like Ambedkar, Phule made a large critique of all these kind of literature. Ambedkar, in The Rise and Fall of Hindu Women, exhibited that suffering of a women in India are due to so-called Hindu religious books. He decoded all the religious texts. He said that these women did not get proper representation even in Dalit literature. It was struggling against caste question, but gender question was not properly addressed in any writings. In most of the Dalit male autobiographies like Tiraskrit, Jhoothan, Apne Apne Pinjare, the narratives are addressing the pain and humiliation due to their particular caste identity. But the double jeopardy of women was veiled. Women were forced to be silenced. The focus of caste identities and caste atrocities were the prevalent throughout the literature. The women were part of that struggle, but they were not represented in that form. The silence was imposed on them. The absence of women in these narratives forced them to deconstruct all the male representation by their own male and upper caste male. And they started a new struggle where they started writing to expose their marginality, that may be called triple marginality of caste, class and gender. Their autobiographies, poetries, stories showcase their struggle, generated a new identity to counter the misrepresentation. In post-Ambedkar period, Dalit leaders have subordinated or suppressed independent political expressions of Dalit women. Even Dalit male writers do not take serious note of literary output of Dalit women and be dismissive of it. This was written by Gopal Guru while analyzing the writings of Dalit literature. The phenomenon of talking differently should not be taken as a divisive either to feminist discourse or Dalit movement. We should take it that exclusion of a big population, that is of Dalit women, is the weakening of Dalit movement or feminist movement. Feminist movement or Dalit movement have to address these questions, and they have to make Dalit women speak for their own rights and their life worth. In the nutshell, Dalits are trying to surpass their peripheral existence or subaltern identity that was constructed by the dominants through religious texts, through social structure, through social rule that excluded them from the mainstream. They have emerged as a counter public in response to exclusion was this dominant publics, that was upper caste. But their emergence again created a center where they pushed their own women, Dalit women, on the periphery. They have countered the dominant discourse of society that was mostly controlled by dominant publics, but they have to raise their women voices to make this discourse or this public sphere more democratic. These dominants used to circulate their dominant discourse through literature, art and culture, and through their literary expressions, and voices of excluded communities or marginals were quite excluded, and if there are some voices, they are forced to be silenced. This create a discursive arena where member of subordinate group used to invent and circulate a counter discourse to formulate an oppositional interpretation of their identities, interest and need. And this proliferation of subaltern counter public means widening of discursive deliberations, which has emerged as a distinctive feature of dissenting caste discourse in India. These counter publics are ray of hope to deconstruct caste, but need of hour is to include women in this, because without inclusion of women, these counter public will again emerge as a dominant public, and women will be forced to create their own counter public, which can be emancipatory for them and which will include women voices, but definitely this will be a shock for a Dalit movement and feminist movement. So, feminist movement have to address the questions of Dalit women, or we may say the questions of third world countries women, and Dalit discourse or Dalit movement should take women as their strength, because without their women their strength will be weakened and they will be in a space where their own women will not be in their exclusive counter public, which will weaken their counter public, and this will be a great failure.